welcome back to another episode of Sit and Spin with me, your host, Joe Roland. Always cause for celebration when my all-time favorite band puts out a new record. Such is the case with the new release from Cheap Trick, We're All Alright, which just came out this past weekend. It's the band's 18th studio album. Comes just a little over a year after their last record, Bang Zoom Crazy Hello, which we reviewed in episode 108. And back in the day, nowadays, new album coming out barely a year after the last one, it seems almost unheard of. But back in the day, that was the standard. Sometimes you'd get a record two in 1 year. A little bit more on that later. Hint, hint. But, somewhere along the 80s, it became 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, even longer between records. But one of the reasons why this record's out so soon after the last one is because, once again, this is the band's next album. We'll say it's their second one on Big Machine Records, and because they have a big record company behind them again, they're able to kind of keep cranking out the music because they got people who support them behind it. Again, it was co-produced by the band with Julian Raymond, who also did Bang Zoom Crazy Hello, and the album's title is a nod to the lyrics of their hit single Surrender from Heaven Tonight. It comes in two versions. It comes in a 10-track regular edition and the 13-track deluxe edition, which is the version we're going to be talking about today. There's also a vinyl version coming out, and if you're saying, Joe, why aren't you doing the vinyl version? It's because the vinyl version is not coming out till August because of the usual vinyl productions and the lag and yada, 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 you know that. But this record, for the most part, finds the band in raw, raucous form, really cutting loose and tearing it up on a good portion of the album's tracks, and better than most bands a third their age are able to do. Plus, it still finds the group evolving and trying on some new sounds as well. We'll get to more of that as we go through this track by track. This deluxe edition, we're going to talk about this because primarily this is the band that most fans of the band are going to buy. Why wouldn't you want to get extra tracks? And it's only a couple bucks cheaper than the standard version. But the record kicks off with a great opening number you're hearing right now. You got it going on, which is a driving rocker, solid hook, sets the pace for pretty much the album's whole first half. Zander primarily wrote this, and he's in great growly voice form in this tune. Next track, Long Time Coming, which was the first single released off the album, follows in a similar fashion, kind of a Kinks meets AC/DC tune to that one. In fact, a long time ago, band leader Rick Nielsen, guitarist, said that he had done a solo album. He was going to have multiple guest vocalists featured on it, kind of like what Santana ended up doing in the late 90s. One of the people he really wanted to work with on that was the late AC/DC singer Bon Scott, and that tune, Long Time Coming, kind of reminds me of what I would imagine they would have come up with for that. So if you dig what the sound of that would be, you're really going to like this tune, which you're going to hear in just a second. And there's a touch of Surrender-style sequencers going on in the background. Not the first time the band has done that. Probably won't be the last either. And it's one of 4 songs that were kind of doled out in advance to people who contributed to the band's pledge music site, which obviously I did. Following that is the song Nowhere, which is another hard-rocking, punky-style tune with distorted vocals and, yet again, a musical callback to older Cheap Trick material with this kind of Dream Police strings going on in the bridge section. And again, it's not going to be the last time that's going to happen on this record. We'll point out other examples when they come up. And there's barely a pause between that tune and we're charging right into the similar sounding Radio Lover, which is a great rocker that dates back to the Cheap Trick self-titled 97 album demo sessions, or as they're sometimes referred to as the Red Ant sessions, as that record was released on Red Ant. And as does another song here, which we'll get to later, that also comes with those sessions, as did Hard on the Line and Roll Me from Bang Zoom Crazy Hello. And after being pretty much pummeled with 4 straight hard rockers in a row, finally get a much welcome change of pace with the mid-tempo Lolita. It's a track that was primarily written by Tom Petersson, and this is one of those tunes where I said with the band kind of sees them treading new musical territory. There's a lot of really nice guitar and bass work going on in this, cooling this really cool pan effect at the end of the song with some Rick Nielsen guitar stuff. And it's the first real highlight of the album for me as far as standout tracks, and would be the song that closes out the first half of the record on the standard or regular edition of the album. Following that, though, what would be opening the second half of the album, it's right back into crunching, hard-hitting sound with another track that dates back to the Cheap Trick 97 sessions, A Brand New Name on an Old Tattoo, which is another one with Tom playing on fire on bass. Features this great Robin Zander scream at the 155 mark, and it's one of the few tunes on the album that actually uses an outside writer in Todd Cerny, who the band have written really forward back in the past. The other couple of tracks on the album with outside writers is Julian Raymond, the album co-producer, is featured on those. But overall, pretty much all the songs on this album were written by the band themselves, which is great. In particularly with Robin Zander and Tom Petersson really stepping up in the songwriting department. They're actually the predominant songwriters on most of these tunes instead of Rick Nielsen, who was primarily the main songwriter through most of the band's career. And that's not to say that Rick doesn't contribute to those songs songwriting-wise. It's just like third or fourth on the list as opposed to being first on the list. Next up after that is the closest thing to a ballad on the album, and is simply gorgeous, Floating Down. It opens on these lush, multi-layered Robin Zander falsetto vocals, and then picks up on the second verse. When that comes in, the pace of it picks up again. The bridge section is right out of the bridge section for the song I Can't Take It, and another musical callback. And it's just another standout, stellar track that's a little different sounding for the band. Again, Tom Petersson primarily wrote it, but just awesome. Really love that tune a lot. Right after that, there's another equally great cut in the breezy She's All Right. It opens on a big Tom Petersson bass line before rhythm guitars kind of glide in over it. One of those played by Robin Zander's son, Robin T. Zander. And then Rick Nielsen kind of comes in adding these sweet Eric Clapton style lead fills. And this one also has kind of a different feel for the band, but again, a real highlight of the album for me. Listen to Me turns the tempo back to the hard-hitting rocker side of the album with a Train Kept a Rollin' Yardbirds guitar riff. And this song, had it been featured in the first half of the album, would have been completely lost in a similar sounding style, if not for the fact that it has a better hook and a more memorable chorus to it. Again, love what Tom Petersson is doing on the bass at the end of the song. And then, for what would be and is the final cut on the regular version of the 10-track edition of the album, we have the song Rest of My Life, which has a very 90s vibe to it. In fact, musically, very much reminds me of the Verve Pipe, and in particular the song Cup of Tea, even right down to the Leslie guitar solo. And that's not a bad thing, because I'm a Verve Pipe fan, and the song is still a great tune. I really dig it, and it's just a solid album closer, almost. If you have the deluxe version, which we're talking about, there's still 3 more tracks to go. The first of which is an exceptional, faithful cover of the Moves' Blackberry Way. It's just outstanding. Much better than the cover they did of Dobie Gray's The In Crowd off of Bang Zoom Crazy and Low. And it's the 4th time the band have covered a Roy Wood song. Of course, Rick Nielsen and the band are big fans of Roy Wood's career, whether it be The Move or Wizard. And the first time they covered him was in the song California Man on Heaven Tonight, and then in the song Brontosaurus, which part of which was in California Man, but back around 1996 they did a 2-song single with Steve Albini, and Brontosaurus was the B-side of that song. That single was also included as a limited edition bonus CD single for certain versions of the Cheap Trick 97 album. And then of course the song Rock and Roll Tonight, which is a Roy Wood and Wizard song that was on the album Busted. And then after that, we have, kind of inexplicably, 2 of the best songs on this album, sort of, because pretty much, for all intents and purposes, they're bonus tracks. Depends on how you want to look at it semantic-wise, but really they're bonus tracks. They're not technically part of the album the way it was released, but they are part of the Deluxe Edition. First one would be Like a Fly, which is a great, solid song that really should have been featured more prominently on the album. It's that good. It reminds me kind of when Through the Night was left off of Lap of Luxury in favor of the outside writer Pap that made it onto that album and ended up as the B-side of The Flame. It's just a stunningly good song. Really should have been featured on the record Prime. And along with that is the next track, If You Still Want My Love, which is equally fantastic. And like Floating Down is kind of a mid-tempo-y ballad, sort of, that just features this Beatlesque kind of touches to it. There's a bit of helter-skelter kind of going on in the end of the song. And again, this is a tune that should have prominently been featured on the album, and I can't believe it's one of 3 bonus tracks. But, you know, along with that, that's going to bring up my only quibbles with this record. As much as I love the music on this album and the songs on it, I'm not crazy about the track run order and the pacing of it. To me, a really great album, and especially most great Cheap Trick albums in the past, are records that have a little bit more evened out, a little better pacing to them. There should take you, a good rated album should take you on a ride. You should feel like you've been on a journey, and in that sense there should be peaks and valleys, and it should really feel more like you're on a roller coaster than on a freight train barreling down the tracks ready to go off them, which is what the beginning of this album sounds like. Now, if that's the vibe they were going for and that's the vibe they wanted, I can respect that because that's their artistic vision. I'm not the artist making this record. I'm just saying, if it were me, I would have done it differently. But there you go. To me, it's the difference between a great album and what could have been an outstanding record. But maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't, let me know. But there's that. In that aspect too, I should say that the second half of this record works better for me than the first half. But in a way, that's kind of the opposite of Banks and Crazy Hello, where I thought the first half was great, and the second half kind of fell apart a little bit. Still some good songs on it, but otherwise, it's kind of flip-flop here. Secondly, that brings me to sort of my next point. Why is there even a regular and a deluxe version of this album? The deluxe version, even at 13 songs, is under 45 minutes. That is a standard album length in this day and age, and even back in the day, that's a standard album length. So I know it's a record company trope to kind of make more money to release 2 versions of the album, but what Cheap Trick fan, as I stated earlier, isn't gonna just buy the deluxe version with extra tracks, especially since it's only a couple of few dollars more than the regular version. Right now, the only reason anybody's gonna buy that regular edition of the album is because they don't know there's 2 versions of the album, or because it comes in a jewel case, which is going to bring me to my last little bitchin' point here, in that, excuse me, record companies, if you are going to do this 2 version of the album thing, put the deluxe edition in the jewel case and put the regular, cheaper version in the digipack. Because the #1 complaint I heard from Cheap Trick fans and read online from them was that they thought this was the cheapest, chintziest packaging for a Cheap Trick album ever, and especially where it's the deluxe version of the album, they wanted better packaging for it. And in particular, record companies, the people who are still going out buying albums, particularly a band like Cheap Trick who's been around for a while, these are the people who want a jewel case. They want better protection for their CDs. They don't want cheap cardboard packaging that feels like it's going to fall apart and the CD's just going to slide right out. If you're going to do a digipack, at least do one of the ones that has an inner tray that at least is going to has a wheel that you can put the CD on and it's going to hold it in place and protect it a little bit better. But hey, there you go. That's my bitch session for the end of this record. Overall though, back to the greatness of this record. And that's that it's still a fantastic album, well worth going out and getting, even this shitty packaging. And more to the point, I'm just thankful that my favorite band is still making such awesome music and amazing songs, and they're still putting it out to this day. But, hitting back earlier, there's still more coming. There is a Christmas album coming out at the end of the year from Cheap Trick's first ever Christmas album. I know sometimes people think Christmas albums, holiday albums, kind of hokey. I love rock and roll holiday albums. I'm looking forward to this one too. Whatever's going to be on it, I'll buy it because I'm that much of a fan. But otherwise, man, this is still a solid album, despite my minor quibbles with it. Definitely go out and buy it. If you're a Trick fan, you're going to want this one in your collection. So go out and get Cheap Trick's new album, We're All Right, and go see the band on tour. Again, if you want the vinyl version, you're going to have to wait for it to come out in August because there's just always that gappy hold-up delay and vinyl getting processed. Yeah, even though I have the vinyl coming on the way and I got a free digital download with it, I still had to have the CD because I'm a completist and I have to have everything. But that's our show for this week. Next week, I believe We have more reissue stuff. Man, there's so much reissue stuff coming out, and pulling some new music. I was glad to actually have new music to talk about this week. But there's some more reissue stuff we're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks, and there's still not so much a reissue, but a compilation album they're going to be talking about too, and an accompanying book that goes along with it. But till then, take it easy, and we'll see you next time on Sit and Spin. Go out and buy a cheap trick. One last thing I wanted to add, I forgot. I'm very much interested to hear what my friends over at the Cheap Talk with Trick Chat page, Ken Mills and BJ Cram, I have to say about this album. I'm not sure if they're going to get theirs up before me or after me, but I'll definitely be sharing that on my page as well. Can't wait to hear their thoughts on the album too. And that's it.